Okay, well, thank you very much. My name is Raymond Yee, and I'm broadcasting from Berkeley, California. It's my great pleasure to do this virtual broadcast. I wish I could see all your faces, and but I guess I'll try to make the best of the technology here. Today, I'm going to talk about working with remix culture, a fad or the future. And as any of you know about how talks get marketed, you'll quickly realize that my title is a bit of a weaselly title, because you're probably going to guess that I'm not arguing that remix culture is a fad. If it were a fad, then it's kind of boring to argue that. Rather, I'm here to tell you about how it's both a fad and the future. And the fact that it's a fad is what allows me to kind of make this marketing ploy to sell this talk to you. So I hope you'll forgive my marketing indiscretions and bear with me, and hope this will be worthwhile for you. Just a quick word about who I am, just to give you some context. I work at the University of California, Berkeley. I have two hats. I'm currently the technology architect for a project called the Interactive University, and I'm also a lecturer at the School of Information. And this semester at the School of Information, I'm teaching a class called mixing and remixing information. I've included my email address here, and so that you can easily contact me. I hope you will contact me if you find this interesting, because I'd really like to hear from you. I'd really like to chat and find out exactly how you see this subject, and because I'm here to really learn as much as you are, hopefully. Then I also put a URL to a page on my public wiki. It's a page which will also have my talk there, and I'll also have other notes that I've put together, and I will be putting more together after the talk to supplement what I have to say here today. I hope that you'll take the opportunity to ask questions and send in the message board, and I'll try my best to answer those questions either here or after the session. Okay, so outline of the talk. I'm going to give you a quick motivation for this talk. I want to talk about what remix culture is in general, and then quickly turn to the specific areas of remix culture that I want to focus our talk on, namely the areas of scholarship and librarianship. I want to give you a demo, two demos. One of a mashup that I think you'll find interesting. I certainly find it fascinating. And also, I want to demo a program that I've been involved in writing called the Scholar's Box, which both of these examples hopefully will illustrate different parts of this remix area, and will give you hopefully a good concrete handle on the area. Then I want to turn our attention to talking about how we in the library community, and even though I'm not a librarian per se, I've definitely worked a lot with librarians, so I'll include myself in the community for the purposes of this talk. So how we in the library community can really engage those who are into remix, and how we can use this as an opportunity to learn more about remix, but also to kind of engage in a way that will be interesting to remixers. So, remix culture at large. I'm borrowing a phrase that I've learned from Lawrence Lessig, professor of law at Stanford. And in the first few slides, I'm going to refer you to a number of articles, specifically in the Wikipedia, because it turns out the Wikipedia is a good source for this area of remix. So, Professor Lessig refers to remix culture to describe a society which really values the creation of derivative works. And I think this is an important concept. And this, I'll try to illustrate this and how exactly people are creating derivative works. Now, remix really comes from has strong associations with popular music and popular culture at large. And here I'll refer you to the article on remix as it's used in popular music as a mixing of other songs and pulling that together into a new song. Also, how this notion of remix has been used to talk about other things in popular culture, video, fan fiction, and the links I have on the PowerPoint presentations lead you to further discussions on those areas. Now, I've been, as suggested in the course titled Mixing and Remixing Information, the title of the course that I'm teaching at the School of Information, I'm particularly interested in the area of remix as it comes to web applications and web data. And here I just put for your reading pleasure, a quote about weblogging and remix. I think of it as weblogging and remix. And this is a quote that tries to summarize what webloggers would like to do with their tools. Not what they can do today, but what they would like to be able to do if they have their druthers and if technology were not a limitation. Essentially what webloggers would like to do, and I would have, as a weblogger myself, and as an observer of weblogging, I would have to agree that I'd like to be able to blog everything that I can think in any format, from any tool, from anywhere, as this quote says. So, of course, being able to blog anything that I can think in any format, from any tool, from anywhere, suggests a type of remixing possibility, the ability to be able to pull or gather information from different sources, to be able to create novel works. In some ways, sometimes those works may be derivative, like straight derivations of the things I gather. Other times, there may be things in which the main constituent is my own work, and then it's supplemented by other people's work. And then once I've created this type of amalgamation in this remix, then I'd like to have the ability to be able to share that with other people. And as we all know, the web has really amplified our ability to do all those things, to gather resources, to create new collections, and to share them anywhere. So in this area, in terms of remixing the web, the term mashup has come up to be the term of the day to describe these types of applications. These applications in which you can pull data from different sources and present them as a new creation. And I have links here on my slide to Mashup Camp, which is the first formal gathering of people around this topic that I know. It happened in July 2006, and I was in attendance, and it was quite an exciting time. And you can follow up and look at the wiki for the Mashup Camp if you'd like to know more about that. Also, I referred you to another article on the Wikipedia about mashups specifically that will give you more background in this area. Now, a lot of you have seen mashups, and I think one of the most famous the one example that I'd like to share with people is housingmaps.com, which is a mashup of Craigslist and Google Maps. It's an interface which allows one to look at housing listings that come from Craigslist through a Google Maps interface. And that's not so novel right now if you were to see this for the first time, but when people saw that for the first time, it was actually quite something to be able to look at housing listings and to see it in a whole new interface. I have a particular, and even within the area of remix and the web, working at UC Berkeley, I have a particular interest in the whole area of remix and scholarly work. And on the slide, I refer you to an article by Larkin Dempsey, the Chief Strategist and Vice President for Technology for Research at OCLC, an article that he wrote for the 10th anniversary issue of Ariadne. And I quote this here because it's relevant here, and also while he mentions my work, and I'd like to have an opportunity to toot my own horn here, and then more importantly, he also actually writes in a paragraph a really good description of the importance of remix and scholarly work. And he quotes a phrase that I like to use in describing this area, and which I've already used in this talk, namely gather, create, share. Gathering resources, creating personal collections, and sharing those collections with other people as a way of describing a fundamental process that we all engage in scholarly work. I will refer you to that article for your reading. Also, a quote here, not on my wiki, sources, studies that have been published that I would argue that would support my contention that in the scholarly arena there's going to be more increasing emphasis on remix. They don't use the term remix, except I think the article by Darren Harley does refer to a type of remixing. But I would contend that the process of pulling together resources from, let's say, libraries, from the web, from one's own personal collections, to create collections that then you can share with others and provide in scholarly interpretations, will have many resonances with the type of remixing that we already see on the web. And that, furthermore, that we in the scholarly library community have a lot to learn from the people who are creating tools to allow this type of remix that's happening en masse right now on the web. So at this point, I want to give these two quick demonstrations to give you something concrete to look at and to think about. The first demonstration is Google Maps in Flickr. And this is an interesting mashup, because what it is, it's a mashup of, you might say, four things. Google Maps in Flickr is a Grease Monkey Firefox extension. So first of all, that means it's a piece of code that someone wrote to extend the functionality of the Firefox web browser. Within that, its goal is to enable someone to be able to look at a Flickr picture that has been geotagged, and to look at that Flickr picture in the context of a Google map, and also to display that on Google Earth. So I'll show you that, and so that you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. The second demonstration is this, what I mentioned here, this Google Scholar. And here I continue the quotation from Lorcan Dempsey, where he talks about the need for what we call a service composition framework. That is, if it's true that there are a lot of materials that are out there on the web, in our libraries, in our archives, that we as scholars want to gather into personal collections and interpret, then it would be really useful to have software tools, software frameworks in which one can easily do that. And I want to show you a demonstration of the Scholars Box, a tool that we've been working on, which we think of as one of those types of service composition frameworks. And specifically, I'll use the example of gathering materials around Henri Matisse as a way of demonstrating the Scholars Box. Okay, so let me just share my web browser here and show you the first application. Okay, so if we're in a live session, I mean, if in real life in the same room, I would be asking you whether any of you know. I'm sure live you know what Flickr is, but it'd be interesting to see. So I suppose you can vote on that and tell me. But I'll just move on and tell you a bit about Flickr. Flickr is a really excellent kind of exemplar of, I'd say, this type of new application. Surface, it's a photo sharing site, but it's actually much more than that. It's a photo sharing site which is really a social networking site. And on top of that, I think one of the most interesting things about Flickr is the extensibility that people have built into Flickr. That is, there is an API, an application programmer interface, that has been built into Flickr that allows programmers to basically create applications that other people can use that makes use of the Flickr data. Well, let me show you that specific example. One of the things that I'm going to show you some of my photos. One of the things that people have done is that they quickly realize that it's possible, that would be really interesting to be able to show where a given picture is on a map. And this process is referred to by various names, but one of it's geotagging. There's actually a Wikipedia article about geotagging. And what that means is that people have taken a picture and then actually put the associate the latitude and longitude, of the picture, so that we can put this on a Google map. Let me see. I got a request to try to increase the size of the screen here, or better show this. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know how to. I'm trying to increase the size here, and I hope you can use the scroll bars there to look at this picture. Okay, you'll see, and you may have to use a scroll bar to take a look at this, but on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see some tags that are associated with this picture. I took this picture a few weeks ago because it's it's quite a sight to see a shrink-wrapped car in a parking lot close to home. And what I did was to calculate the latitude and longitude of the place where I saw the picture. Now, there are different ways to do that, and one can actually use this tool that I'm going to show you to do that. But what I want to show you here is that those of you who are familiar with Flickr might recognize that, hey, what's this Gmap button here? The Gmap button doesn't come as a standard part of Flickr. Rather, that's a button that's been inserted by this Gmif Grease Monkey extension. So this person in Taiwan wrote a script which added this button. Now, when I hit this button, what happens is that a Google map is brought up that shows you where exactly this car is, where this picture is associated with. And this is in a town that's just north of Berkeley. And so that's quite, I find that quite fascinating, that I can basically make it so, or someone else has made it, that I can quickly display a picture on a map. I can show you some of my other pictures here. I can show you, for example, a picture from the Code for Lib conference that was held a few months ago. This is in Oregon State University. And this is a picture of my wife and me standing in front of the Metropolitan Opera House. So you see different maps show up. Now, someone just asked me the question, well, how does this tool know where this picture is? And I was trying to show you that if we go back to this picture, and I close the map, that there are tags here. In Flickr, one is able to add tags to the picture. And this is not the usual type of tag. So the tags that this tool is using is called geo::lat, and then you have a latitude 37.8, geo::lon, and -122. And I actually put this, the tool that I showed you is actually able to calculate this location by clicking on a map and then associating that location with this picture. Now, there are other ways to do this, but that's we can talk about that in the Q&A. Now, let me just show you that map again, and I just want to show you the fourth thing that this mashes up. I said that this is a mashup of Flickr, of Google Maps, and then it's also a mashup of Google Earth. So when I hit the Fly To button here, what that does is it sends a file, an XML file, for use of Google Earth. And what that Google Earth does with that information is to move the map. Like you'll see my map in Google Earth moving over to the location of the picture. Okay. So I teach a class, and we spend time dissecting this, about how it works, and we can talk more about that too, either online or offline. But what I want you to take away from this is that's a mashup that has real, I think, real educational and scholarly potential, or it's at least indicative of the types of things that one's able to do. An amazing thing is that this is not something that Flickr created, not something that Google created. It's something that an individual person in Taiwan created by pulling together the existing technology that's there. It's important to note that this is aided by things that the fact that oops, let me show you. Sorry, let me show you Google Earth Plus here. Oh, sorry. This is aided by the fact that both Flickr and Google have made interfaces that allow programmers such as this person to be able to mash these things together, to remix application, to pull data from Flickr, to put it on the Google Map, to send it to Google Earth, and that's an astounding thing. Let me now also turn our attention to, I apologize for when this application sharing, I think some of you didn't see how it worked in Google Earth because I think I was sharing only the browser and not Google Earth. So my apologies for that. Let me now turn attention to the second demo, and let me switch over to the Scholars box here and just quickly describe to you what it is. This is an application that we at the Interactive University have been working on for the last several years. And it's a piece of software that's written for the desktop. And it's a, let's see, I don't know if I'm sharing this. Let's see here. Sorry, I'm just trying to find out whether let me, oops, shared application exited. Okay, sorry about this. Let me fire up the application again, and let me try to share this again with you. Okay, I have the Scholars box running, and now I'm going to do application sharing here. Okay, I hope that you can see this. I'm going to just assume that you can see this and proceed. Actually, I can't see my desktop now. I mean my app, so I'm not sure that you'll be able to see it. So let me. Okay. Let me just forego showing you the Scholars box, and let me just describe what this thing is, because I'm not sure that I'll be able to show it. Actually, I'm going to try one again. I'm going to share the whole desktop, and then I apologize to those of you who won't be able to see this quite as well. But I would like to show you the Scholars box too, as a demonstration of this type of service composition framework. Okay, I'll just do this demonstration fairly quickly and describe to you in words what's happening in case you can't see this on the screen. Okay, so what the Scholars box, what I have here is I've brought up the Scholars box, and I'm showing you an application that we've been writing. And this is a tool to allow scholars to be able to gather digital content into personal collections that they create, and then once they've created it, they can share it. And the specific example I want to share with you this afternoon is the scenario of finding information about the French artist Henri Matisse. And I have the Scholars box running in front of me, and I start a search. This search window then presents me an option of where I want to search. And so I will select all these different sources: Amazon.com, the National Science Digital Library, the California Digital Library, Melville, which is the Union Catalog of the University of California, And what comes back are search results for the keyword search of Matisse. So for example, what I'm showing you here are results from Amazon.com, and you see books that have come from Amazon. I'm going to create a new collection, and then be able to drag and drop information that I've gathered from Amazon into my own personal collection. Notice that when I do that, I'm gathering both the object and also the metadata that are associated with this book. And say I come to Google and then also drag a search result from Google. What I'm trying to show you here is that instead of, many of us are used to using Amazon.com, which allows one to be able to grab a book and put it in your shopping basket or make it part of your wish list. And similarly, there are other functions in various systems that allow you to create collections. But it's really difficult to make collections of things that kind of cross repository boundaries. And the goal of the Scholars Box is to allow one to be able to search anywhere and gather from anywhere. Now we're starting to see a lot more of these applications out there, and there are little companies that specialize in this field. And what the Scholars Box is still aiming to do is allow one to do this for scholarly use. So, for example, if I do search for Matisse on Yahoo Image, and I grab an image, then I can put it into my collection. And once I've created this collection, there's many things that one would want to do. And I'll just show you one thing here, and that is creating a PowerPoint presentation, or more exactly, OpenOffice.org Impress version is kind of a PowerPoint-like application. And I show you this because one of the scenarios that a lot of scholarly users and teachers have for digital collections is that of making presentations easily from collections. And what the Scholars Box did here was basically take advantage of the mashability, the remixability potential of the sources of information that I've shown you, namely Amazon.com, which have interfaces to allow one to grab information, and then OpenOffice.org, whose file formats are in XML, thus allowing one to just create the right file format and then feed it to OpenOffice.org. There's a lot more I can show you, but I will leave it at that point for you. Let me close this down. Okay, so that's a demonstration. Those are the two demonstrations that I wanted to show you, and I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint presentation here. And I hope everyone's able to follow that. It's a bit disconcerting to do a demonstration and have the screen disappear and essentially talk into the void. But so please give me feedback to let me know. Okay, I do see a question. It says, do we worry about copyright, or do we figure this is just scholars' fair use? And I would definitely. Let me just take up that question briefly, and we can come back to this. That's a great question. In many ways, I think of this as a tool that has to be in the hands of people who are going to exercise fair use. But obviously, this is a tool that can enable a lot of copyright violations. And so, as a tool maker, that does concern me. But if I try to constrain my tool to enforce fair use, then first of all, I think that's impossible, because fair use is highly contextual, and there's no way a computer program can figure out whether such and such a use is fair use. And secondly, I think it's a bit of it's not really trusting our users, and I know that's not a totally satisfactory answer, and we can discuss that at greater length. Okay, so let me just continue this the rest of the talk, which won't be too long, and hoping that we'll have a lot of interaction here. Okay. Okay, so what about the implications of remix for education and research? When I thought about this part of the talk, I knew that this is a huge topic and one that I could not possibly fathom or really greatly explain because I'm trying to figure that out myself. So I would just raise a few issues here. One is to refer you to a wonderful article by Brian Alexander in the EDUCAUSE review on Web 2.0, a new wave of innovation for teaching and learning, where he does write about the possibilities of this type of technology that some people have called Web 2.0 type technology for teaching and learning. So that's a good background article to read. Obviously I'm a big believer in the possibilities of technology, and I think of myself as both a scholar, but also a real alpha geek tech type. So I think of myself as a scholar geek, so I'm definitely going to be an enthusiast. And I like to think about remix in terms of a term that I learned first from John Seely Brown, the term bricolage, a term that he borrowed himself. And I linked to an article where he refers to bricolage as a way of talking about this type of, it is the wave of the future for how we think about a lot of type of creation. And so he thinks in terms of open source software, or I would say that the types of remix that I'm showing you is a type of bricolage authoring. And in the page that I have on my wiki about bricolage creation, I actually linked to an article that blithely suggests that Johann Sebastian Bach, my favorite creator, and one of the icons of Western high art and intellectual life and creativity, and himself engaged in a type of I was saying bricolage authoring. So a music scholar out there, I'm sure, could take me to task here. But from my understanding, Bach was very much, as many musicians, composers of his time, engaged in the practice of reusing not only his own music, but the music of his great predecessors, namely people like Vivaldi. And I'm very interested in hearing more about whether it is fair to think of composition, music composition, in the order of Bach's work as a type of bricolage. Okay. I'm hearing that my microphone is coming back at high pitch. Is it still that bad? Or how about this? I turned down the mic. Does that sound any better? Okay, great. I'm going to continue. Okay, so the last thing here I refer to is that just as I was preparing this talk, the UC Berkeley campus, the Letters and Sciences division is offering a colloquium on the use of internet technology, and specifically they had invited Professor Mark Barline from Emory University to come speak. He spoke on campus 2 weeks ago, and he came to the attention of the campus leadership through his article in the Chronicle of Higher Ed called A Very Long Disengagement, where he noted what he thought was a correlation between the advent of all this great web technology and the decline in general knowledge. And specifically, this is a quote here that I'd like to read to you. Professor Barline noted that while electronic technologies have made vast sources of knowledge and information available to today's students, most of them use those resources mainly to communicate with each other and to reinforce the social order of their earlier years. That type of quote does concern me, because I do think, while all this Web 2.0 technology is making possible all this great bricolage creation, and I think it's great bricolage creation, is it also enabling many people to tune out? And is that the effect that's going to win out? I think that's a really interesting question, and one that I don't know, maybe we're too early to know the effects of that yet. And I think, especially as librarians, are concerned about that. I mean, is the web going to drive people away from books? And if so, then what does that mean for librarians? So that's, of course, not a very deep analysis of that situation. But these are the topics that are the larger context for this kind of remix. Now, I'm taking a stance that it's useful to really jump in with this technology, and I'm very excited about it. So I've been teaching a class, the School of Information, and the School of Information here at UC Berkeley used to be a library school. So there are what may be useful in a School of Information may or may not apply to a library school, but I think there are certainly connections. And I've seen this as an opportunity to really kind of as an opportunity to train the next generation of librarians and information professionals the tools and knowledge that they need to really engage with Web 2.0 and Remix, and really kind of appropriate this knowledge for themselves and then share it with other people. The approach that I've taken here is to ask students to really use some of these applications, understand applications as end users. Specifically, the big application that we've been studying is Flickr. And then once they've really understood this application as a user, then to study the programming interface, the API of that application. And then when they're able to do that and able to write programs to exercise that API, then they're in a position to try to apply the same type of way of thinking to other applications. So, for example, if they've understood Flickr, understood how the Flickr API works, then they can turn their attention to study Google Maps first as a user, and then to study Google Maps as a programmer. And then in this moment of synthesis, I'm hoping, and I show them how then they can bring together the knowledge of Flickr and Google Maps and to create something new. And this is a very practical project-based driven way of learning. It's not a course that's high on theory. I don't make people read the SOAP specifications or study the history of SGML and how it became XML. They can learn that once they feel the motivation to learn that. Rather, I'm a big believer in thinking that if they can play, they can get their hands dirty. That's the best way of learning. I'm really excited about this course. This is the first time I'm teaching it, and it'll be coming to an end in a couple of weeks. And I'm hoping to have an opportunity to teach this again. And I'm also in the process of thinking about writing a book on this subject so that other people can learn about this. And I hope there's interest out there. So in that spirit of learning by doing, let me just suggest a few ways that you can learn more if you find this intriguing. I'd say, one, try out some mashups, and I'll give you a link to a place which has a database, essentially, of web mashups. Just try them out, use them as users, and see whether you find them interesting. Some of them are, obviously, some of them are better than others, some of them are more useful than others, and I can suggest some specific ones to people. Before I go on to the next point, I do have a question that's asked, is the course that I'm teaching an online course? And no, it isn't. And I have a lot of resources and syllabi that I've put together, but unfortunately it's in the closed wiki right now. And one of the things that I want to do after the course is to pull together those materials and present them in a form that's publicly available. So I'd say stay tuned for that, or write me an email if you're interested in learning more about that. And it'll be on my wiki for sure. I'm an avid wiki keeper and blogger, so you would see things there. Okay, and I would love to be able to have a course, opportunity to teach it online if there are ways to do that. Okay, secondly, in terms of specific mashups, there's this one that's actually up right now that I would say really take a look at, and it's called International Remix. This is something that comes out of Yahoo Research Berkeley, so it's made by people that, some of whom I actually know. Two of them were my students, even though I'm not taking credit for them because they're doing that work as part of their Yahoo work and not as part of the class. But It's a place which allows users to come and make video mashups, drawing from clips of movies, videos that are going to be shown at the San Francisco International Film Festival. And go take a look at it. And before I went to see it, I had never really tried to make a video mashup, well, partly because I didn't have much of an interest in it, but partly the tools were not easily available to me. But this is an example of a video mashup. You can go and take a look at what other people have done with this international remix. And then actually you can go find the mashup I made. It's called Couples. And I was just really astounded by the product, by the effects that come about when you take pieces of video and lay another soundtrack on top of it. I'm sure those of you who use iMovie and do that maybe already know about this, but it was a revelation to me, and perhaps a revelation to those of you who have a chance to try it. I suggest also, thirdly, to go to the Creative Commons site. That's a good introduction to the rationale behind Remix, and it's a good pointer to tools and also sources of Creative Commons licensed material. For those who aren't familiar with Creative Commons is an effort to essentially exploit to use the mechanisms that are currently available in American and international copyright to allow people to make it clear that in some cases they want to be able to share their work more easily than is commonly regulated by copyright. Go to the site and you'll find a much better explanation than what I just gave you here. And finally, in terms of librarians, I'm a big fan of John Rudell. John Rudell is a columnist for InfoWorld. And one of the projects that he put together was a piece of JavaScript, a bookmarklet, which allows one to, for example, go to Amazon, find a book, but then hit a button, and then it sends you to your local library. And I consider this a type of remix because it's basically allows one to make the best use of things, right? Make use of Amazon.com for finding books, to find commentary about books, but then to get that information directly from the web browser into your local library catalog. So I would recommend there. Then I will refer you to other things that are specifically, I think, relevant to the library world. And let's see, I got a question about how we access links on the slide. I don't know if the PowerPoint slides will be made available to people, because if you have them as PowerPoint rather than as a display here, you'll be able to click on them. I will also post the PowerPoint presentation on the wiki, and the URL for the wiki will be, I showed it earlier and I will show it again in the last slide. And then so I will make this as available as possible. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so let me just quickly go through these pointers here. Then that are particularly relevant to the library world and research librarians. One, and many of you already probably have heard of this, there's a new report that was put out by the University of California librarians, a report called Bibliographic Services Task Force Report. And it's a report that is looking at the future of bibliographic services at the University of California. And that's an interesting, thoughtful analysis on the current state of things like OPACs and what we can do to improve them, and what we can do specifically to make these services much more available to, I would argue, a kind of remixing generation of people. Secondly, I think that a good source of information would be the Code for Lib community. Now we ran our first conference recently, and it's a community of library people who are techie, who are coders, who write programs, who create library systems. And there's a discussion list, there's an IRC channel, and I'm sure there'll be a new conference next year. And so I believe that a journal is in the works that will cover things like these types of topics. Number 3, participate in this, I said, Library 2.0 Meme Fest. And by that, I mean that there's a lot of people out there right now promoting the Library 2.0 tag. It's a kind of riff on this whole Web 2.0 talk. And it's, as I said earlier, not against marketing, and certainly Web Library 2.0 is a good moniker to talk about the issue of how libraries can be remade or advanced to be friendlier to people who are in a Web 2.0 world. And I link on this slide to a recent Library 2.0 camp that just happened. There's a wiki which outlines different things that people are talking about. So definitely go there to learn more. And then I was thinking, recently I've been talking to librarians about things that I would love them to do. And the one thought that has come to me is that I wish librarians would weblog about their collections, the collections which they know the best. And I've seen a lot of library bloggers out there talking about technology and libraries, and they've done us a great service. But at this point, I've not seen many librarians talk about their own collections. And the reason I suggest that is that I think it's important for things that are in libraries to be more visible to people who are using the web. And I think it would also be exciting to me to hear librarians talk about what they know best and what they love, and what, frankly, not many other people know about, and that is their own collections, and why are they choosing the things they're choosing, what's new there, why people should come to the library and read about and get their hands on things in their collections. I'd be curious to hear what people think about that idea. And finally, in terms of technology, there's a lot of specific things we can talk about, and I just suggest the starting points that it says make your systems remixable, and say starting things like generating RSS feeds from one's collections is a good kind of first step in that whole process. There are a lot of steps to take afterwards, but I'd say that's a good place to start. Okay, at this point, we have 10 minutes left, and here are the links to the wiki again, and there's a tiny URL. My slides will be up on that wiki. They're up there right now, and as we saw in the chat room, there are links to my slides on the Learning Time site, and my email here again. And I'd love to take some questions and do a Q&A right now. So should I turn off my mic, or do people talk into it?
Hi everyone, yes, if you'd like to use your microphone to ask a question, why don't you raise your hand, and we'll call on you and it'll put you into a queue. If you'd like to raise your hand and take the mic, that would be great. Otherwise, please type your questions into the direct messaging area, and we'll follow along and look at those as well. So is there anybody who would like to grab the microphone and ask a question, pose a question at this point? It's a quiet group. It's late in the day, and they're stunned by the level of information you provided, Dr. Yi. It was just an amazing session. Is there somebody? There's somebody. Danielle, please click on the talk button and say hello. Danielle, you just need to click on the talk button, and then we'll be able to hear you.
Try this again. Is it working now? Looks like it. Anyway, I said it was a great talk. I really enjoyed it. But I wondered what the details of doing some of the API remixing is, and how much coding proficiency one really has to be able to take advantage of that.
Okay. The level of proficiency depends on what you want to do. I'd say you do have to have some level of proficiency, but there are people who are building tools to make it easier for other people. For example, and I can't remember the link off the top of my head, but there is a website which allows one to create a Google Map, a customized Google Map, without any programming knowledge. And the idea there is that you can go and click a few places and then make the map and copy the code and paste it in your own website. So that's an example of something simple that doesn't require high technical knowledge. But some of the other things that I showed you, for example, to make this Google Maps in Flickr, that's actually quite a sophisticated mashup. And I use that as an example, a continuing example for the students to dissect in my class. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that pretty much does it. I know that there's some new stuff coming out with Ajax, where there's some tools to let people basically do even derivative works of some of the dynamic scripting stuff. But frankly, it's all a little bit beyond me in terms of my level of coding ability.
Okay, does anybody else have a question? If you've got a question, please raise your hand. Otherwise, I'm going to just throw it over to Dr. Yi for some closing remarks. Cheryl, go ahead and just click the top button. Actually, Becky, it looks like Cheryl typed your question and did it privately, so maybe you'd like to paraphrase that question and answer it.
Let me, it says, as we look at revisioning our information commons, are considering the types of technology we should make available to our students to produce the Remix project. Could you comment on special needs for technologies? I think it depends. I think I might have to know a bit more about your project, but I think that if I know much more, let me just make a few comments. I think a good place to start is to look at websites like Flickr or some of the many more of the Yahoo properties that are out there that have APIs that make information available, and then to think about the question, well, do we have that type of information, and can we make that available, and look at how other people have been making use of that information that, say, it comes from Flickr. And if you can identify the similar needs for your information commons as you've seen in these other systems, then to try to analyze and pull out those parallels and start there. So I hope is that kind of what you're trying to get at? I'd be glad to talk to you offline too.
Okay, I think that wraps up the session and the day. I'd like to thank everybody for coming. Dr. Yi, do you have any final closing words for this group?
Sure. Again, I want to thank you all for attending this session, and I'm very interested in hearing any feedback that you have for me. If you have any questions, and contact me at yi@berkeley.edu, or go to my website. And I know my wiki is not terribly comprehensible, but there's some information there, and specifically the link that I've provided here.